Hey everyone, thank you guys so much for joining us. It's just about 3 p.m. here on the East Coast, and you are joining our sponsored Products Masterclass. So, if you've been on a Masterclass webinar before with us, this is actually completely different. We've completely redone the content, and this one is much more specific around lowering your ACoS and different strategies you can do to kind of reduce that wasted ad spend that you have, increase sales and visibility, and increase profitability overall. Uh, Let me first introduce to you who we have on this webinar. We have two great speakers. The first is to my left, Gari.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I haven't been on the webinar in a while, but I'm excited to be back.
Yep, she's a veteran for sure on these webinars. And then Megan as well, another veteran.
Hey everyone, I'm Megan Gleason. I'm part of the customer success team, and you probably remember me from the last couple of masterclasses. So excited to be back with Gary and well.
Yeah, so to create this, at Takeometrics, we have hundreds, thousands of clients, and we have had, different strategies put into place. We've tried things out over the years, and the different tips that we're giving you today are the ones that we've seen make the most impact for our clients. So the things that we're giving here are not even opinion; they are Amazon recommendations as well. And I think if you follow these steps, you're going to see a significant impact into your business, whether you're trying to be profitable or launching products. We have strategies for all of those things. So let's jump right into the agenda.
Perfect. So we have a lot of information to get through here today. We're going to try and break it down for you as simply as possible and give you some real actions you can take. We'll start with first, understanding and measuring impact of advertising on your business, and then campaign structure, which is key to taking any action, whether it's lowering ACoS, whether it's improving sales. You got to get your structure right. Then we're going to go right into ACoS, give you some suggestions on how you should think about ACoS, how you can control it, how you can measure it, and give you some really specific scenarios for ACoS and exactly what you need to do in each of those. And then, of course, at the end, we'll have our little takeaways and wrap up our talk today.
Also, for everyone listening in, feel free to, this is an interactive webinar, so feel free to use the chat. We have some experts on the other end ready to answer your questions, so definitely shoot us any questions.
Yeah, and we'll try to keep an eye on it as well and see what we can address during the course of our webinar here. So feel free to reach out, and then we'll have some polls along the way as well to get some feedback from you guys.
Awesome. So let's kick off the webinar with understanding just basically the importance of sponsored products and that impact it has on your business there. So diving in, we're going to first address the flywheel effect. So this is actually something you've probably heard us talk about in previous webinars.
I think we mentioned it maybe 3 times.
A couple of times, at least, at minimum. But the flywheel effect is actually really really important in the fact that sponsored products plays a huge role. What it is actually speeding up your sales velocity. Sponsored products is that incremental revenue to your overall Amazon business, and what it's happening is it's helping your organic rank over time.
Yep.
Will, it looks like you want to jump in there.
Will's ready to jump in. He's all about the flywheel effect.
Oh, I love the flywheel effect. I think about the flywheel effect much like you might think about your 401k. You want to invest money in as early as possible within your career, because over time that compounds, it gets larger and larger.
Yeah.
So if you start this advertising really early, the effects that you're going to see within your business over the years is going to become astronomical in comparison to if you were just trying to do this organically. So we've seen huge changes within our clients' accounts.
Yep.
And it's something that you should be thinking about as part of your overall business strategy.
And it's something that Amazon is starting to shift focus to as well.
Yes,
we'll give you some new metrics in a little bit here, but Amazon has started including return on ad spend as part of their reporting within Seller Central as well. So it has a huge impact. Amazon knows it has a huge impact, and they're starting to shift focus as well. So if Amazon's doing it, you should probably be doing it as well.
And it's not just for, when you're starting out on Amazon, it's also for, those new products. How else are they going to get visibility when they don't have that sales rank built up? Sponsored products is a huge lever for your business as a whole.
Yep. So just to set the baseline, so we talked about the flywheel effect. Of course, we've talked about ACoS already, but for those of you who might not be as familiar with sponsored products and terminology, here's a quick definition and quick calculation. So ACoS is a metric that's very specific to Amazon, and it means advertising cost of sale. It's a percentage that basically tells you how efficiently you're spending money on sponsored products ads. When you're calculating ACoS within your Seller Central reporting, we recommend looking back over a 30-day period and to give yourself a 3-day buffer. So if I was going to pull my reports today, for instance, I would look at the period between February 5th and March 4th.
Yeah, and we recommend this holistic view just because there's so much volatility day to day and week to week. And we also know about that attribution window, so it's really good to look at that bigger picture, not just when looking at performance metrics, but also when making decisions within your campaigns there.
Perfect. And then the other metric we're going to be discussing today, it's going to be new to a lot of you here. Even if you are sponsored products veterans, take a webinar veterans, this is probably not one you've encountered yet. And this new metric is ROAS, which is return on ad spend. So return on ad spend is interesting because it's not an Amazon specific metric. It's a pretty common marketing term and advertising term that others in the industry use as well. And it's essentially the inverse of ACoS. So it's your ad sales over your ad spend, and it tells you how much ad revenue you generated per dollar spent on advertising.
And basically a good way to think about this is, if you have a larger margin, you can survive on a lower ROAS. So it's going to be inverse to ACoS. It's basically that ratio flipped. However, if you have a high ACoS, you're going to have a low ROAS. Whereas if you have a low ACoS, you'll have a high ROAS. So you'll see that that relationship there.
Yep. It looks like Jordan has a question around ROAS. Do you measure ROAS on your net dollars, not the numbers that Amazon receives? In this instance, Jordan, this reporting in Amazon, we'll spend a little bit more time going into it, but this is going to be on your gross ad spend and sales. So it's not your net revenue that you take home after Amazon fees.
And actually, ROAS is a great indicator to evaluate, what areas are working and also where there's room for improvement. So it's just another metric alongside ACoS that's really going to help you detect that efficiency.
Yep. And it looks like we have another question around ROAS and the 4-to-1 ratio that we have up on the screen from Laura. So the 4-to-1 ratio, Laura, is it's an industry-wide, so as in a general advertising and marketing metric. It's not specific to Amazon for AMS for sponsored products. So it's a metric that just regular marketers and advertisers use to determine whether or not their ads are efficient. So it's not an Amazon specific metric. And this is a pretty new metric for Amazon to include in reporting. So there's not a lot of history behind it yet. But 4-to-1 is what, an average marketer or advertiser would look at outside of just Amazon. Great. So having introduced these two metrics, we wanted to give you some idea of where you would find it within Amazon. So we have this list of Amazon reports.
And where you can find the reporting is under your reports dropdown in your Seller Central account. The advertising reports, some of you may have noticed that there's a whole new look to them. Not all accounts currently have this, but I know Amazon is slowly rolling this out to all sellers. And it's basically a lot more customization around some of the old reporting that they had. You can select, what name you want to name it, the date range, and a couple of notable ones that we wanted to point out that have ROAS is the advertised product report, the search term report, the newer version, the products placement report, and also the keywords report as well. You'll see that ROAS metric. There is one other report that doesn't have the ROAS metric, but we'll actually talk a little bit more about that new report in a little bit.
And if you want to take your ROAS a step further, you can also look at your business reports within Seller Central and measure your ROAS not just for your advertising revenue, but look at your ad spend against your overall revenue, and that would be your business reports by child ASIN. So you can see how each product is performing and what your ROI has been for that product.
Yeah. So bringing it back to that flywheel effect, not just looking at reporting on sponsored products and keeping it in that bubble, but looking at the bigger picture. How is your, spend maybe on a particular ASIN translating into overall sales? How does it impact the overall business?
Yes. So don't be intimidated by the slide. I know it's a lot of screenshots on there, but the idea was to show you how many of these new reports have this ROAS as a metric listed on there. Great. So we've had a couple of requests for benchmarks. So we wanted to share some of our own data here with you. So this is just some averages we've seen within our own sellers looking back over a 30-day period. So we've seen, based on an average monthly spend of about 4,500 on SP, we've seen a 15% ACoS, a $6 ROAS, 50-cent CPC or 53-cent CPC, and 8% conversion rate.
And just to note, this is a lot of different categories tied together, a lot of different types of sellers. So it's really going to vary. And we're actually going to answer that question you're thinking now. What is my ideal ACoS? Where should I be? It's definitely going to vary across sellers, especially with, your objectives and where you are.
Yeah, and how much competition there is in your category. Yeah. All of those factors are going to play into it, and we'll discuss those factors in a second. But what you can see from these numbers is not so much, how your number should line up against it, but how the metrics relate to each other. So, a higher ACoS will usually mean a lower ROAS, potentially a higher CPC. So that's more what you should pay attention to here. But going back to, the ROAS, the 4-to-1 ratio, that's the industry standard. So you can see that Amazon's ROAS, or as an Amazon seller, you have the chance to have a higher ROAS than is common in the industry. So here we see a $6 average across our sellers, which is a little bit higher than that 4-to-1 ratio we discussed earlier.
Yep.
Great. So time for our first poll here. Megan's going to launch that in a second. And we want to know which of these issues listed do you encounter the most often? Which one creates the biggest headache or problems for you?
And with any of these issues that we sort of see on Amazon, everybody has one. Most of our clients, they come in with 1 or 2 or even 3 of these issues specifically to their account, and it's why they come to us. So don't feel bad if you have 1 or more. But it's important to know where the weaknesses within your businesses are so that you're actually able to solve those. If you're always kind of blind to your own metrics, then you're never going to be able to sort of take your business to the next level. So as a product guy myself, I'm always looking at data. I'm always looking to see how things are converting within my own business. So make sure to be looking at your metrics daily.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like we have most of our responses have come in.
I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results with everyone. Oh, wow. It looks like majority of you, almost majority of you, 49% are saying that you encounter your ACoS being too high. So, you've come to the right place,
well,
the right webinar. And it looks like the next highest group of you is not generating enough sales.
So neither of those responses, Megan, is shocking to us.
Nope.
From our conversations with sellers. Those do seem to be the most common pain points, which is how we came up with this webinar for today.
Yeah.
5% of you say that you have no issues. Maybe you should be on the webinar as well.
Yeah, give us your tips.
Come join us.
If there's anything that we haven't addressed in these poll options and you want to share that with us, feel free. You can send it in as a question.
I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to hide those results and let's get back to the webinar.
Perfect. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to go through how to take care of that ACoS in just a second here. But as we mentioned earlier, the way to control your ACoS, or way to control any other metric within sponsored products, starts with the right structure. So
and this, go ahead. And this may look familiar from the last couple of master classes. We've, really reviewed those campaign structure best practices, but Gar is going to dive into a little refresher if you were on those webinars.
Perfect. So we have a little checklist here, and Megan's going to drop a link to a more detailed list in the chat box. So look for that. But this is just a quick review of what your campaign should look like. So you want to make sure you have that mirrored structure. You have an auto and a manual for each campaign with the same ad groups and the same products within each ad group. You want to make sure that each campaign reflects similar products with similar margins at the same objective. And you want to make sure you use ad groups to categorize your variations. So this is just some overall campaign configuration. We have a more detailed checklist that Megan has dropped in the chat box. But this is really the foundation you need to see the best sponsored products performance.
It's not that you can't use sponsored products without this.
Yeah.
It's that you're not going to be the most efficient or profitable. And in the market right now, with so many people jumping into sponsored products, with margins getting slimmer and slimmer, it's more and more important for you to make sure that your sponsored products are running profitably. And this is the best way to start off with the right foundation to actually make that possible.
Yeah, and the benefits of the right kind of campaign configuration is not just performance related, it's also going to help you measure your success adequately. So you could see your performance at the campaign level and at the ad level, and you can really see whether your ACoS or any other metric is lining up with your objective for that campaign. It also allows you to control budget and bids, and we'll talk about this in more detail in just a second here, how you could do that on your end. But having the right campaign configuration is, like Will said, it's not impossible to see success without it, but it helps you measure that success better to have the right structure in place. Great, so this brings us to our next poll question. We want to hear from you what your ideal ACoS is. So we've asked before on webinars what your current ACoS is, but we'd like to know, what do you consider an ideal ACoS for yourself?
Mine is 1%. I don't know what the rest of you.
Will is living in the real world today.
Yeah, so I mean, depending on what your goals are, your ACoS could be up to 50%, it could be over 50%, it could be over 100%, depending on if you're really trying to be aggressive launching a new product. 0 to 10 is a great place to be. More realistically, 10 to 20% is what a lot of our most mature and often largest sellers are in. And 20 to 30, if you're living sort of in your own world within Amazon, which is rare, that can actually work out well. Additionally, otherwise the 20 to 30% can be high. It's tough with margins, so hopefully, most of us are in the lower edge of this threshold.
Yeah, and it looks like a majority of you voted there, so I'm gonna go ahead and close that poll and share the results with everyone. All right. Wow, it looks like the two most popular ones are the two lowest. I'm not surprised there. 0 to 10 and 10 to 20%. And then it looks like just a handful of you are looking at 40% and over.
Yeah, I mean, we maybe should have broken that out 0 to 1%. If anybody else, but yeah, I think 0 to 20% is where you want to be. 0 to 10%, I think we have many clients that sit in the 2, 3, 4%. We really do.
Yeah, a lot of it, when it comes to ACoS, like I said, there's a lot of factors that impact it, but one of the big ones is going to be just the cost of your product or
right.
the sales price of your product. A lot of times the 1 or 2% that you were mentioning, well, I see those with higher ticket items.
Yeah.
Right. So think
really
computers, think equipment,
like big pieces of equipment, medical equipment, things like that.
Right.
All right, great. So
those results.
Perfect. And I did see a quick comment come through about how fast we were talking. Sorry. We'll try to slow down a little bit more. We're just so excited about ACoS.
And we'll also be sending
and we also
out
had a lot of coffee today.
Yes, almost too much. We'll be sending out the replay to all the registrants, so you'll also have this accessible after the webinar as well.
All right, perfect.
Right. So getting on to probably the most common question that we're asked almost on a daily basis. What should my ACoS be? And we'd like to tell you that it should be a certain percent, the specific number, but it's actually going to vary based on a couple of things. And it's going to be different for every single seller, where they're at, or whether they're a reseller or a brand. So on our next slide, we have the answer. It varies.
Which is the answer that everyone wants to hear.
Yeah. And this is going to depend on your margins and of your objectives. And if you've tuned into the campaign creation masterclass, that's how we want to structure your campaigns. So being able to group all those products that share those like objectives, which we'll go into in a second, and also have those similar adjusted gross margins is really going to help you target them more specifically and really measure performance and ensure that you're meeting your goal there. So the ideal ACoS, like we said here, is going to keep getting higher and higher just because there are going to be more and more sellers on Amazon, which is going to be driving up that cost per click. So that's always going to be changing. It's never going to be a static number there.
Exactly. And that's why it's important not to think about this as a general term. What's good for one person is not going to be a good ACoS for you, because it's really going to come down to your own business and what you're trying to accomplish. So if you think about it in terms of margins and objectives, then you have better benchmarks to measure your success. So start with your margins. That's going to help you create your benchmarks. So what number do you want to be above or below? And whether you decide to be above, at, or below is going to come from your objectives here.
So the different objectives, this may look familiar also from our other webinars, launch, growth, profit, and liquidate. Once the margins are established, these are going to determine the aggressiveness. So if you're in a launch phase, Typically that ACoS target is going to be above your margin. Growth typically will be hovering a little bit above the margin. Profit will be, of course, under. And then liquidate will really depend on a cost benefit analysis there, but ideally you need to weigh out those options there.
Yeah, and it's important to think about what metrics you should be measuring at each of these stages as well. As you can see on this list, ACoS doesn't feature in every single one of these buckets because if you are thinking about launching a product, and it looks like Dale has a really good question about that. He says, I'm struggling with generating impressions when my ACoS is less than 20%. To me, it sounds, Dale, like you're maybe more in the launch or growth phase, and that's not a phase where you should be concerned about ACoS yet. So you want to be looking at those numbers like impressions. You want to be looking at the number of clicks, which can mean running at a higher ACoS at least for a little while. But once you've gone through that discovery phase, gathered enough data, then you can start to shift focus and start to capitalize more on those efficient conversions. All right, perfect. So now that we know how to measure your ACoS and what sort of benchmarks to set yourself, we're going to go into ways you can actually start controlling your ACoS. So we're getting into the meat of our presentation here today.
The good part.
The good part. We'll have all the answers, guys. So some of the factors that influence your ACoS can be competition, how new your product is, what's happening on your product page, and pricing. So if you can run a campaign to get a lot of exposure, get a lot of clicks, but if all these people land up on your page and then don't buy your product, you're going to hurt your conversion. You're also going to see a really high ACoS because you don't have any money to show from those clicks.
And we just know historically, more saturated categories, they're going to typically have higher cost per click. It's more aggressive and higher ACoS. So that's just, a really huge factor in ACoS generally.
Yeah. If you're in nutrition, if you're in supplements, it's just always going to have higher ACoSs. Being in the 20s and 30s% is very common. So you're gonna have to watch your margins really closely. It is just the most competitive area of Amazon. So,
and also another huge factor is how new your product is, and also that product page content. So, for example, if you have a new product with very little reviews, that definitely might take a handful more clicks to grab that conversion compared to one that's maybe a bestseller ranked there. Even product page content, that's huge. You want to make sure you dedicate that time, just because if you're driving all this traffic and spending money, how are you going to capture the conversions if you don't have that high quality content?
Tim makes a good point, Megan, here about product review ratings. So product reviews kind of ties into two of these things here, the newness of your product and then your product page as well, because shoppers can see your ratings when they first see your ad, and they can of course see it when they land on your product page. So if you have a newer product without as many ratings, or maybe the ratings are low just because the number of reviews is low, that's going to impact how well your ad places, and it's going to impact how many people convert off of that ad.
That social proof is huge.
Yes. I know I never buy anything without reading a few reviews on Amazon, and I would say that's probably true for 99% of shoppers out there. Perfect. So these are the factors that can impact your ACoS, but what tools do you have in your control that you can leverage to change your ACoS metrics and to get the most out of your campaigns?
And a good way to look at this is helping you mitigate your risk. As a seller, you take on so much risk, but this is going to help you lower it as much as possible, thus helping you lower your ACoS. So a couple here are bids, negative keywords, refining your targeting types, and also utilizing budgets on that campaign level. So we're going to tell you how to take advantage of these and actually how to apply them later on in certain scenarios we see that are very common.
Yep. So when it comes to bids, the number one thing is you need to change them. You can't leave your bid amount static. You can't set the same bid across the board and expect efficient conversion. So there's nothing that's going to stop you, right, from setting a $2 bid for every single ad group, every single keyword. You can definitely do that, but that's probably not going to be the most efficient way to spend your money.
Don't do a set it and forget it strategy. I think that's what some people have called it in the past. We definitely, encourage you to be looking at the data and adjusting based on them. We say, adjust bid based on objective and performance. And also, this is just going to help you remain competitive. If you're, investing more in opportunities that are converting well for your product and maybe have a low ACoS, this is just going to help you really just gain more control.
And bidding in general, how often would you say that, if you're not using software, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the sponsor product optimizer, how often would you change bids?
So in an ideal world, it's something you should do daily. So not looking back at each day's performance, but looking back 30 days each day and making those changes so you capture trends and you're able to be more responsive to changes in the marketplace.
What's the risk of changing it too often?
If you change it too often, you end up catching maybe a spike in the market or a spike in the trend. You're not looking at the bigger picture. So it could be that, one day you stocked out, maybe one day you had some issues with your listings, maybe you're seeing a high ACoS that's much higher than normal. And if you react to this the next day, you're going to end up missing out maybe on a 30-day window of very consistent good sales. So ideally, you want to do this daily, looking back 30 days, but at the very least, you should be doing it weekly. If it's something you're doing manually, I understand you might not have time to do it every day. At least on a weekly basis, you should be changing your bids, or at least evaluating your bids. Sometimes you might change them, sometimes you might not, but you should at least be reviewing them every week.
Cool.
Perfect. And you want to change these bids in the instance of automatic campaigns at the ad group level and in the instance of manual campaigns at the keyword level.
And I think a good thing to note here is it says learn about your willingness to spend. So you want to make sure, I know we went over a couple of business objectives, more so profitability. You really need to know where that cap is, where it doesn't make sense to bid any higher. Where that ceiling is essentially.
Correct. Yeah. So this is going to tie almost directly into competition. So if you can figure out what your willingness to spend is based on your margin and based on what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to know whether or not that's sufficient for your marketplace. So if you are in a competitive category, as Will was mentioning, maybe you are a supplement seller and your willingness to spend ends up being, 85 cents on a bid, you'll certainly be able to get some clicks from that, but will you land on the first page placement? Probably not.
So another question I hear constantly is, should I try to be number one in my bids every time?
And the
I'm sure it's a simple question, right?
That would definitely be the goal for a lot of sellers there, but the answer is it's not going to be a very great lasting long-term strategy. You definitely want to be focusing on that long-term. So sometimes, like a $5 bid may not make sense for page one if that's not sustainable profitability.
Yeah, if you're selling, a $7 product and it's costing you $3 to land on the first page, it's not sustainable.
So maybe focus. Go
ahead. Yeah, but if you have, you're in a niche category without as much competition, it's not as saturated, and as we were discussing earlier, it's a high-priced item. Maybe you can keep that going for longer. So at the end of the day, you need to understand how much you're willing to spend and really how much you want to take home and how profitable you want to be at the end of the day.
And sometimes it's okay to focus on those cheaper clicks just because that'll translate into, maybe a lower ACoS in the long run there.
Yeah. So Megan, Dylan has a good question regarding default bid suggestions that Amazon provides. How would you recommend using that or suggested bids?
Yeah. So that's I guess another common question we get all the time from sellers, and it's actually great data to use just to see, what's going on in your category and basically what, kind of area or level you need to start at to just kind of get that keyword or maybe ad group going. We definitely don't recommend staying at this for a longer term strategy. We definitely use that performance data and adjust on that 30-day window. So that'll really just help you focus on your own product, just because that category, page one bid range especially may not work for you.
Yes, I would say, this bid suggestions are a good starting place, but you don't want to stay there. You want to move up or down based on how you're performing and whether or not that's a sustainable amount of spend for you. Great. So the next lever that you can pull is going to be negative keywords. So negative keywords are huge. They can be intimidating to a lot of people.
Yes.
It's hard to decide sometimes whether or not to pull the trigger and go ahead and negate a search term.
Yeah. And a couple of factors that we recommend taking into account is impressions. Do you have enough impression data? Has it been running long enough? Sometimes sellers like to try to negate search terms that maybe have been running for 5 or 6 days and haven't had a chance to really perform. We actually recommend this 2 to 3 week window at a minimum, at least. Another thing we recommend taking a look at is clicks as well. You can, really see if you have enough click data to feel more confident in negating it. So that's good. And also spend, it will be another huge factor. You can actually look at specific thresholds just to ensure, especially if you're in a really competitive category, that you're just meeting that minimum. So for example, Will, you mentioned, health, maybe you'll have a higher spend with no sales to take action on.
Mm-hmm.
So this is definitely one of the areas of our app that we have put a lot of focus into because it is such a killer on sponsored products. Just by going through your negative keywords, making sure you're removing the keywords that have too high of ACoSs or just aren't generating sales can reduce your ACoS by 5% plus easily just by removing those. So that is definitely one that you want to take a look at because you never want to be spending money on terms that are irrelevant to your products. And you'd be surprised the things that are in there from your automatic campaigns. They are horrifying sometimes. So
yeah, so that's both the benefit and the downside to those automatic campaigns. So they're going to capture a whole host of search data you would never have thought to add in as keywords into your manual yourself. But there are also going to be these random ones that are drawing a lot of spend that you really should consider negating. So you have that tool to curb spend there. You can use your organic data as a benchmark. So if you have more clicks than it would take you to convert organically, then you should consider negating that term because at that point, not only are you spending money, you're also decreasing your conversion rate.
And negative keywords are really great for automatic campaigns, as mentioned, just because you have very little control. You can only bid at the ad group level. You can't add keywords. So that's great for auto, but manual, we get a lot of questions, should I be using negatives to help ACoS in the manual? And the answer is yes, definitely, especially around the broad and phrase match types, just because if you have a keyword that's working really well for you, however you maybe see, a spike in ACoS, it could be certain search terms that are driving that up. So being able to negate it against those really, highly relevant and high performing keywords will just really benefit you, especially in your efficiency.
Yeah, we have a few questions coming in about finding your organic or overall data. So that's something you would find in that business report we discussed earlier. It's going to be your in Seller Central under reports, business reports, detailed by child ASIN is the name of the report, and it's going to show you number of clicks, it's going to show you number of page views, and the for conversion rate, the ones you want to look at are either your unit session percentage or your page view percentage. Right, Megan?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Great. So the other action you can take is refining targeting types, and this is specific to manual campaigns. So what you want to do is take your keywords that are in your manual campaign. You have, broad match, phrase match, and exact match, and you want to keep converting these and adding in those narrower match types, longer tail, more specific keywords. So if I'm running a keyword that's, white mug at a broad match type, I show up for small white mug. I want to add small white mug in as a phrase match keyword. It's more specific, so there's going to be fewer people searching for it, but I can usually get better conversion rate and really try to build up my market share on that search.
We actually tend to see a lower cost per click and thus lower ACoS with that phrase and exact match types in the manual, just because, like Ari said, there's less people, and you can actually, it's a lot easier to double down on what you're finding works well in those refined match types. So definitely really works well for efficiency, lower ACoS there.
Yep. And then the last little tool you have in your bucket there is your budget. So recently I've seen a lot more questions coming in about campaign budgets. It's become a thing that people get more concerned about. So your campaign budget is definitely important. What's most important about the budget is that you don't run out if your campaign is doing well.
Yeah, we always recommend never letting budget constrain growth. However, if that growth is really inefficient and hurting maybe your bottom line or maybe hurting the flywheel effect there, that's where you can take action and actually constrain that spend.
Yeah.
It's a great mechanism. A lot of sellers don't realize that, you can cut down on the spends in the inefficient campaigns, and that way you have more spend to reallocate in the ones that are working well there.
Exactly. So it's not going to, increasing your budget isn't going to increase your spend necessarily. Decreasing your budget is not going to decrease your spend. But if you have a campaign that has been running for 6 months, for instance, you're not getting the ACoS maybe that you wanted, maybe it's just a competitive category and just costs you more money to place your ads, then you can consider just setting a low budget on it so you continue running those ads, but you're not overspending there.
And I've actually used budget as a mechanism to help phase out campaigns for some sellers that just aren't really working well for them. So that's another way to, slowly cut down on it, even if you want to just completely wipe out those campaigns.
Great. So now that we've discussed, some of the tools that you can use, we're going to dive into some very specific scenarios related to ACoS and what actions you can take in each of those.
And we listed about 5 scenarios. However, this isn't really limited to them. That's just the most common ones we've seen and actually seen sellers struggle with. So we wanted to really address them with you and also provide some insight in what you can do so you don't feel stuck in these scenarios. So the first one we want to dive into is, we're seeing automatic campaigns have a really high ACoS. So we've actually bucketed this into 2 different groups just because we want you to think about it in 2 different ways. For any new campaigns, we actually say, hey, it's almost too soon to worry about ACoS just because you're in that keyword discovery phase, you're collecting search term data, you want to focus on that collection. And then once you have it running for a good amount of time, I hate to put a specific time frame on it because it'll vary for every seller. Once you find that there's enough data, then you can really start to go into that mature phase of taking action, which is really working with constraining budget, being more aggressive maybe with negative keywords. First of all, this is really going to help the auto. I know we talked about relevancy. A lot of crazy things can pop up. So really just ensure that you're letting those search terms run long enough and you have enough click data especially.
Yeah, one way to, decide whether to take that budgetary action on your automatic campaign is if you have a corresponding manual running, the manual is running efficiently, it's been running for a while, you have enough sales from it, it's just the automatic that's giving you trouble. That might be a time where you decide to cut down your budget there and spend more on your manual campaign.
Yeah, good clarification.
And we never recommend to just kill a campaign all by itself. We always want to do incremental changes to your account so that you can track and take into account the metrics that you're seeing.
Because your automatic campaign, even though it's maybe not giving you the sales dollars that you'd like, it's still letting you get more real estate by placing your ads on competitors' pages, for instance. So that's still an important benefit to them. So instead of killing them completely, capturing sale or potential seasonal sales data, we recommend just using your budget as a control there.
Yeah, and just some sellers, run the automatic, stop it, and then continue to run the manual. But think about automatic as a way to invest in how customers are finding your product. So that's just a great opportunity and another benefit of the auto, even though we can see a higher ACoS than the manual.
Exactly. So that brings us conveniently to the next scenario.
To the counterpart, which is the manual. So we actually have a lot more control and options to lower that ACoS. Sometimes right off the bat when we start a new manual campaign, we see a high ACoS. They have new keywords, we're collecting data, and that's where I think a big key is going to be the bid adjustments here, really to allow you to remain competitive for those keywords, but also really find what that true value bid is. You can use the bid adjustments to, look at what's going to work well for that specific keyword. Like we said, maybe a lower cost per click may make more sense versus maybe a higher cost per click will work really well for you in your category. So it'll really depend on that performance. Next is match types. That will really help lower that ACoS. So to think about, phrase and exact, those are going to definitely be the lowest cost per click in ACoS. So being able to refine match types is going to be huge, as we mentioned prior. And then also, as we said, using the negative keywords to create more efficiency and maybe those keywords that are working well for you. You don't want to pause that keyword. Maybe you just want to cut out that specific search term because sometimes you can pick up some crazy variations there.
Yeah, and starting your manual campaign with data from your automatic will help you keep ACoS lower to begin with because you're only going to put in keywords that have converted already for you, so you know that it should result in sales.
And we typically don't recommend using too much broad in the manual unless you're really just looking for any kind of opportunity for search terms, but definitely take advantage more so of the phrase and exact.
Perfect. And then the next scenario is going to be looking sort of at the ad or product level and if there are specific ads or products that are driving your ACoS up. So you might have, 5 ads running in a campaign. 4 of them are doing really well converting for you. There's one variation that really is inefficient. It's driving up spend, and that's going to make your whole campaign look like it's performing poorly.
And it's funny. A lot of sellers actually don't think about looking at the ad level. They're always like, oh, it's the keywords. It's, it's something that they've housed in the campaign, but they don't specifically look at those ads. So we've mentioned in other webinars, advertise your entire catalog. However, we want you to use the data now to decide maybe it doesn't make sense, maybe it's not profitable for your business to invest in them and sponsor products.
Yeah, and Amazon's made this a little bit easier for you with the new reporting.
Yes.
So it's called the Purchase Product Report. This is part of the new reporting we discussed earlier. So if you go into reports, advertising reports in Seller Central, you could find this there. And Amazon's going to show you your advertised ASIN as well as the purchased ASIN. This is important to note because you might see, for instance, a blue version of something has a really high ACoS. People keep clicking on the ad, not purchasing the product. So it's going to look like maybe it's underperforming. But what it might be doing is functioning as your loss leader. People are coming in through the blue ad, but maybe everyone ends up buying the black version instead.
So paying attention to the change in advertised ASIN compared to the purchase ASIN, that's actually going to help you, detect what you should be pausing maybe and what you should be focusing more attention on.
Exactly. And one way to figure out, the underlying issue here is to consider pulling those variations or ads or products into their own campaign. And that's going to show you pretty clearly if they're the underperformers and what you should be doing to impact them. You could bid differently on them at this point. So if you don't want to keep investing in this underperforming variations, this is the way you control for it. Great. So the next scenario is going to be around sudden increases. It could be sudden decrease as well, but usually when people are concerned, it's because it's a sudden increase.
I love the sudden decreases.
Those are always nice,
great.
right? They happen more often. So a couple of reasons are typical ones that we see are seasonality, changes to campaigns, and product page performance. So typically with seasonality, we may see a spike maybe like a couple weeks before the holidays. People are clicking around, they're window shopping. Maybe that's not converting as efficiently as maybe on Prime Day, for example.
Yeah, I would say, the next time you're probably going to see this happen significantly leading up to Prime Day because people are waiting for those deals. So I've been guilty of this. You just put items in your cart and you wait for the price to drop. So a lot of people are going to be doing that in window shopping. Sometimes these increases could be due to changes that were made to your campaign. So if you added a lot of new keywords, for instance, or created a whole bunch of new ads in a campaign, that could lead to a sudden increase in ACoS because you're falling into that bucket of new products and new keywords.
No.
Particularly, I think, and Megan, you can let me know your thoughts on this, but particularly if those keywords aren't coming from your automatic, right? So if you're using other tools to find those keywords or the keywords you're coming up with yourself, those are the riskiest ones in this instance to use your ACoS.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen people do some external keyword research, even pulling in their main keyword, for example, or even using it from their own .com things they found that work well. So that's pretty typical in driving up ACoS. And then obviously we talked about new products and how those typically have higher ACoSs as well.
Yeah, and the other one to look at is your ad group default bid. I think people tend to forget about ad group default bid because really the only time you might pay attention to it is when you're creating that campaign, filling out your bulk template. And a lot of people forget what they set it at, forget to make changes to them. But if you're manually managing your bids, then you should be very aware of your ad group default bid. It's good to start that high sometimes if you want more exposure, but as your objectives change and you start to get more concerned with ACoS, you should go back and think about changing that, making it a little bit lower. Yeah. And then the last section is going to be product page performance. So this could be, sudden decrease in conversion. A lot of times this has to do with price. If you've changed your price significantly, maybe you're running a promotion and you stopped, you might notice a drop in conversion. Or if there's just more competition now for your product, someone else has a listing or product that they're advertising on your page, that could be driving sales away. So those are important factors to consider.
I always say knowledge is power here. Know who your competitors are. Have a good feeling of what the market around your products is like. As long as you're really close, you're going to be able to figure out what is going on most of the time. The worst thing that you can do is not have the right information and start to make changes to your campaigns that's based off of bad information. That happens so much. Correlation does not mean causation. Really get into your metrics, really understand, why you're losing in certain places, and then make the best guess from there. don't be irrational when it comes to making decisions or be emotional.
Yep.
Make sure that you, even if you're seeing high ACoSs, don't necessarily just start cutting, things left and
Right,
right.
because it might not be advertising that's driving that ACoS
Yeah.
up. It could be a different factor outside of your campaigns.
And that's where we recommend looking at those business reports by child ASIN. That's also going to see maybe trends in, your overall business. And then you can drill down even further if it's, tied to that, and you can make those changes accordingly.
Yeah, in Amazon, I always like to say patience is power. Really, the people who are patient are the long-term winners. And those are, a lot of our clients are those types of people. So.
Yeah. Great. Speaking of patience, stick with us for a little bit here. So scenario
Our
number
last
5.
scenario.
So this is for campaigns that have been running for a while, but you haven't really seen ACoS shift. It's either staying flat or maybe it's even increasing in some instances. So what do you do here? So this indicates to me, Megan, that maybe their objective has shifted, right? If your campaign's been running for a while, you probably want to move into profitability, or you probably want to move into growth.
Yep. And this is going to indicate that what you're currently doing may not be working. So you need to actually change your actions, change the behavior towards, the bids and the objectives, like we said. So, like we said, higher placements aren't always going to be profitable. So maybe, you're coming out of your product launch phase. Maybe you don't need that visibility as much. You've built up that sales rank, looking back at that flywheel effect. You want to be focusing on lower cost per click. So maybe that will result in maybe the third page placement in a lower click.
Yeah. In instances like this, there's always going to be an opportunity cost. So if your campaign has been running for a while, performance hasn't shifted, you might have to sacrifice something. So whether that's placement, you need to bid lower, be okay with placing on the third or fourth page instead of the first, or you need to be willing to give up some of those more expensive clicks, which could mean potential loss in sales volume, but it's going to give you more efficient conversions the times you do get those sales.
And we recommend looking at one of Amazon's new reports, the new product placement report. It has that ROAS, as you can see in the far right-hand corner there. But it's also going to show you that placement, whether it's top of page or maybe slightly below. You'll be able to see, what's really going on with that specific ad.
And Jorge has a question, Megan, around negative keywords. He wants to know if he should use negatives in the auto, but and also in the manual campaign.
Yes, definitely. We recommend for both auto. It's going to be a huge, huge way to just curb ACoS and remain efficient, cut out anything that's irrelevant.
Yeah, particularly in this scenario, right? So if you're trying to be as aggressive as possible, you want to be pretty ruthless with your negative keywords and add them to both your auto and manual if they haven't given you sales.
Yeah, but just be careful looking at time frame, relevancy, making sure you have click data. Make sure you're really confident in those decisions there.
Great. So we want to wrap this section up by actually hearing from you again and seeing which one of these scenarios that we discussed today is the one that you encounter most frequently.
And let's be honest, no matter if you're selling millions a year or if you're just getting started, you are going to have one of these problems or all of them at every point in your business.
Correct.
It is just a fact of the market that things change. ACoS go up and down.
I've seen some sellers have, struggle with all of them, so that's totally okay.
And it could be that one campaign has one issue and the other has another. So there's really no right or wrong answer here. You're probably going to be in multiple buckets. Unfortunately, I don't think we gave you that option to indicate that to us. But
all the above.
It's possible.
So we can change it to which is the most relevant to your business. Yes. It's a great question, and I think part of the reason we put this webinar together is because we've heard so many times it's like my ACoS is going up. It went down for no reason. Should I be worried about sales?
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden my sales are going down too. It's really important to see the problem and then have the solution in your back pocket.
Yeah.
Because you're going to see these endless amounts of times with your campaigns as you grow your business.
And it's also important to be systematic. As Will mentioned earlier, you can't just make the change and expect results overnight. So you need to make a change, wait an appropriate amount of time, and if you still don't see results, then take your next action, because if you just change 5 things at once, you're not going to know what did and didn't work.
Isolate that change. It's important too.
And, in our office, we put blindfolds on. We have a target board, and we just throw a dart, and it's either like cut budget or like make a negative keyword. It just could be anything. That's oftentimes how we make changes. Just kidding. But
All right.
sometimes feels that way for sure.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close that poll and share the results with everyone. And it looks like the majority of you, 28%, your manual campaigns have a high ACoS. So you're really going to want to rely on the bid adjustments, the match types, even using budgets and negative keywords there. So that'll be really key. And it looks like the next biggest group is the automatic campaigns have a really high ACoS. So both types of campaigns have high ACoS.
What do we do, Megan?
I'm glad you guys attended the webinar then.
And of course, we'll have a replay of this sent out Friday. So if you didn't, a lot of these concepts are pretty complex. So if you want to watch it again, we'll have that, and you can just walk right through and look at your products and your campaigns and make changes as you're listening to this again. So we always want to make sure that you have the content that you need.
Perfect. So that brings us, towards the end of our webinar here. We wanted to wrap up some of these concepts for you and give you a couple more action items to take away. So the first thing is, how do you identify your ACoS targets? So we've kind of put the margins and objectives together for you. Megan's going to be dropping a link in the chat box, so you have access to this chart moving forward as well. So don't worry if this is a lot of information to retain right now. You can always access it at that link. But this is essentially us giving you some firm numbers here. That's what people want most often from us when they talk to us, is our numbers. So we've kind of put your margins and your objectives together here, and these are sort of the ranges you should think about when you're looking for your target ACoS. So if your campaign is in launch phase and you have a margin of 11 to 25%, your ideal ACoS is in the 35 to 60 range. It's not going to be that all the time. As your products mature, as your campaigns mature, you move more to profitability. That ideal ACoS will change. But to start off, that's where you want to aim for. And the amount of time each seller spends in each stage is really going to differ. It's going to depend on their business model, maybe on a specific product level. So, don't think that you have to expend an exact amount of time in each stage. This is going to really vary, and it's going to really depend on how that product performs. Well, it looks like you.
I always have something to say.
Always has something.
Add a little.
Always something. So when I look at this right away, I'm like, there's just a ton of numbers. But I like a specific rule of thumb when I'm looking at this chart. When I'm thinking about launch, growth, or profit, I'm thinking about it this way. So for launch, I'm generally having a higher ACoS than my margin. For growth, it's about even, and for profit, my margin is always higher than my ACoS, so I'm always profitable with those sales. Always think about it from that perspective. You want to stay within that, because if you actually have a really high ACoS in comparison to your margin, and you think you're kind of in like the growth or profit, you're really not. You're launching your campaign. You're spending money to get reviews, not so much to keep dollars in your pocket.
Yeah, and just to bring it back to the flywheel effect, you don't want to just keep it into sponsored products. You want to see how that spend is translating into your overall revenue there. How is it really building up your business? So not just keeping it within ACoS, but also the bigger picture.
One thing that a lot of people don't think about, but is liquidation. Mm-hmm. This is the type of thing where you're trying to lose the least amount of money possible. So you might end up throwing away inventory. You're gonna have to pay those fees to get things removed from Amazon. You might just get it back, and then you're gonna have to sell it somewhere else or just hold it within a warehouse. Sponsored products is great for liquidation. In most cases, it mirrors a launch campaign, but with a very different end goal, which is that you're not really looking so much for reviews, so much as to get the inventory out of your grass to open up that capital. Yeah, you want to always have your capital in the right place.
And often running an ad can end up being a more cost-effective option than maybe pulling that inventory back or trying to send it to another marketplace.
And not having that sale.
Yeah,
it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, it's a tough situation to be in. Everybody ends up in it, and you just have to know, like, don't get too emotional with your products. If something's not working, cut it and go to the next thing. Because the markets are always changing, the world is changing. You can't stop that. So
wow, words of wisdom.
Wise words always.
Have to be a nimble seller.
Yeah.
Great. So some takeaways we'd like you to leave with today. As Megan just mentioned, keep the flywheel effect in mind when analyzing the impact of ad spend. So whether that's looking at your ACoS, whether that's looking at your ROAS as far as return on ad spend, whether that's against your ad revenue, even better against your overall revenue. Making sure you have the best campaign structure in place because that's going to impact how you manage your campaigns and help you evaluate performance.
And we sent out that link for that checklist earlier in the webinar, so feel free to check that out. Great information there.
Yep. And keep your margins and objectives in mind when determining what your target ACoS is. Again, please use that chart. We dropped the link in for that because knowing where you are, where your product is in the life cycle is key to understanding how you should be measuring your ACoS, because otherwise you could be measuring yourself on the wrong metrics.
Yeah, great. So we're moving into our Q&A area. So if you have any questions that you want answered last minute before we get to the end of our presentation, just send that stuff in. I think we have a few here that we can talk about before while you throw in your questions, but just send them in.
Yeah, keep them coming in. We have a couple more takeaways to get through, and then we'll go right into Q&A. You want to make sure you leverage bid changes, negative keywords, targeting match types, and then to some degree your budgets as well when you're controlling your ACoS. And evaluate what scenario you fall into and use the appropriate tools and make the appropriate changes based on the specific bucket that you're in. Great, so we have some time for Q&A. I know we've addressed some throughout the presentation today, but let's see if there's any that we can address later. So Will, this might be a good question for you as our brand director here. Dill wants to know, whether we'll be offering any webinars purely for our product.
Yeah, so that's one thing that we're always looking for from our customers is what you would like to hear within our product. It's definitely something that we're working on, yeah, for sure, because there's complexities within the market, and so sometimes the decisions you have to make within our software aren't necessarily black and white. So we're definitely going to be doing something like that, and thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dill. Question from Raoul about adjusting his bids in Seller Central. When you're looking to adjust your bids in Seller Central directly, Raoul, you would want to go into a particular campaign. If it's automatic, you would just go into the ad group level, change your bid there. If it's manual, you want to click into the ad group, and then there's a tab that says keywords, and that's where you'll go through and make your bid changes. It's not going to be on the ad page, it's going to be on the keyword page.
You can also do this in bulk through Excel. So if you do the bulk operations download, you can look at a 30-day period with that buffer that we recommend, and you get all your bids there. So if you want to do if you have a larger account, that's great for scaling out the bid adjustments.
Great. And then we have a question from Kyle about the main page of Campaign Manager showing something different versus the individual campaign. The most common reason that I see, Kyle, is if people have used a different time period maybe that they're analyzing across. If that's not the issue, then I would look and make sure that you're looking at the right metrics on each. What I mean by that is you want to look at, because each campaign, of course, is going to be performing differently versus what you're seeing at the account level for your performance. So when you're drilling down, make sure you're looking at the right metrics across the account level and campaign level. If that wasn't clear because I was talking a lot there, let us know, we can clarify.
Yeah, so I think we're almost to the top of the hour. Yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much for joining. If you had any questions about any of the content we had, always reach out. And if you're having trouble dealing with your campaigns, dealing with adjusting bids, dealing with keywords, the reason we're in business is because we create software to solve that problem for you. So always jump in, get a free demo of our software. We're helping thousands of sellers deal with their sponsored products campaigns. We'll have a customer success rep reach out, and yeah, we'll get you started.
Perfect, and definitely join us for our next webinar. I think Megan, you and I might be on this one as well.
Yeah, so this one's really exciting. So we're going to go specifically through what it takes to launch a brand new product. So how you're going to have to set up listing pages, setting up new campaigns for those launches, watching your products mature. It's going to be great. If you're a new seller or an experienced seller, this should be helpful because everybody's launching new products all the time, and there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. and we've seen it all. So we're
The
definitely
good, the
gonna,
bad, and the ugly.
yeah. So we'll definitely be able to help you out on that. So you'll see some emails come out from me around that, and probably some other advertisements online. So just reach out if you want to get started with that webinar as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Look for the recording from this webinar to come through. You can always watch our older webinars on our YouTube channel as well. It's where they all live.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks so much, guys. I hope my jokes weren't too bad this week, but I was in the mood. So
if it makes you feel better, we have to listen to him all the time.
Yes.
And you get to say goodbye.
Well, thank you guys so much. We'll see you in 3 weeks. And if any of you guys are coming to Prosper, come reach out to our booth.
Yeah.
Almost forgot that. Yeah, we'll be at Prosper, so come.
We'll be at Prosper. Come meet our. Well, none of us will be, but our team will be there.
Yeah.
So come
find
us.
Yeah, you can say hello to Alistair McLean, Foreman, CEO and founder. So
Yep.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks so much. See you next time.
Bye bye.